Professor Vexilor stood at the front of the xenobiology auditorium, all six of his crystalline eyes gleaming with what could only be described as academic smugness. He had been teaching comparative genetics at the Galactic Institute for 200 cycles, and he had never, not once, encountered a species quite as bizarre as humans. "Class," he began, his voice resonating through the translators with practiced authority. "Today we examine the genetic structure of species 7492, commonly known as Homo sapiens." The auditorium was packed. Students from 43 different worlds had crammed themselves into seats designed for species with entirely different anatomical requirements. In the back row, a gelatinous being from Sector 9 oozed slightly over its containment field. 3 rows down, a pair of insectoid scholars clicked their mandibles in anticipation, and in the very front, because of course she would be, sat the human exchange student. Her name was Kira Wells. She had arrived 6 weeks ago with nothing but a duffel bag, an unsettling smile, and a reputation for asking questions that made tenured professors reconsider their career choices. Vexilor activated the hollow projection. A massive double helix materialized above the lecture floor, rotating slowly, each segment color-coded and labeled with meticulous detail. "As you can see," Vexilor continued, zooming in on a particular section, "the human genome contains approximately 3 billion base pairs, quite standard for a carbon-based bipedal species. However, what makes them particularly interesting is the sheer amount of genetic debris they carry." A student in the third row, a floating consciousness named Blixer, pulsed with curiosity. "Debris, Professor?" Yes. Vexilor waved a manipulator appendage dismissively. "Humans are walking museums of evolutionary failure. Approximately 90% of their DNA is non-coding. We call it junk DNA. Evolutionary leftovers. Genetic garbage, if you will." Several students chittered with amusement. One particularly enthusiastic arachnoid started taking notes on its web pad. Vexilor was warming to his subject now, his posture straightening with professorial pride. But here is where it becomes truly fascinating. He highlighted another section of the helix, this one glowing an ominous red. Roughly 8% of the human genome consists of endogenous retroviruses, viral DNA, fragments of ancient infections that have been permanently integrated into their genetic code. The classroom fell silent. Even the gelatinous being stopped oozing. 8%, Vexilor repeated, savoring the shock in the room. 8% of what makes a human human is, quite literally, the genetic remnants of viruses that attempted to destroy their species millions of years ago. Viruses that failed. Viruses that humans not only survived but absorbed, incorporated, made part of themselves. He paused for dramatic effect. This was always his favorite part. Think about that. Humans do not simply recover from deadly infections. They take the invader's genetic code, weave it into their own biology, and carry it forward through every subsequent generation. They are, in essence, a composite species, a patchwork of survivors. Kira Wells raised her hand. Vexilor's primary eyes dimmed slightly. "Here we go," he thought. "Yes, Miss Wells." She stood up, and Vexilor was reminded, not for the first time, how unsettlingly tall humans were. She looked at the projection, then at him, then back at the projection. "Professor," she said slowly, her voice carrying that strange human quality that could sound like a question and a challenge simultaneously. "Why does 8% of our DNA come from viruses we survived?" Vexilor blinked. All 6 eyes, in rapid succession. I just explained that. Did your translator malfunction?" No. She waved a hand, smiling in that way humans did when they were about to make everyone else uncomfortable. "I heard you. I am asking why. Why 8% specifically? Why those viruses? What did surviving them give us that was so important that we kept their DNA for millions of years instead of scrubbing it out?" The classroom had gone from silent to dead silent. Even the environmental systems seemed to quiet down, as if the station itself was waiting for the answer. Vexilor opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Well," he began, then stopped, because here was the thing about teaching for 200 cycles. You learned the material so thoroughly that you stopped asking the obvious questions. You explained what and how with perfect clarity, but you forgot to ask why. And now this human, this barely graduated primitive from a backwater planet, that had only achieved faster than light travel 40 cycles ago, was staring at him with those disturbingly forward-facing predator eyes, waiting for an answer he did not have. The current scientific consensus, Vexilor said carefully, is that these viral insertions occasionally provide beneficial mutations, evolutionary advantages, the ability to fight new infections, perhaps, or what? Kira pressed. Professor Vexilor felt something he had not experienced in decades of teaching, genuine uncertainty. He adjusted his thermal regulators, which was his species' equivalent of tugging at a collar that had suddenly become too tight. Or, he continued, trying to maintain his professorial dignity, the viral DNA may have contributed to various evolutionary developments we do not yet fully understand. Kira nodded slowly, like she was processing this. Then she did something that made every being in that auditorium lean forward. She laughed, not a polite chuckle, not a nervous giggle, a full, genuine laugh that echoed off the walls and made the translator systems briefly glitch, trying to convey all the layers of human emotion packed into that sound. "You do not know," she said, still smiling. "The Galactic Institute, with all its advanced technology and 2,000 years of genetic research across hundreds of species, does not actually know why we kept the virus DNA." Vexilor's skin flushed a defensive purple. "Miss Wells, I must remind you that human genetic science is relatively primitive compared to—" "Oh, we do not know either," Kira interrupted cheerfully. "But we have theories. Want to hear them?" Before Vexilor could respond, she turned to address the entire class, and he realized with growing horror that he had lost control of his own lecture. "See, here is what we figured out about 20 years ago," Kira began, pacing in front of the projection like she owned the place. "That 8%, it is not random. Some of it codes for proteins that are absolutely critical for human pregnancy, specifically for building the placenta. Without those viral proteins, human embryos cannot implant in the uterus. No pregnancy, no babies, no humans." The classroom erupted in surprised chirps, whistles, and biologically diverse sounds of shock. "That is," Vexilor sputtered, "that is merely one application of, there is more," Kira continued, ignoring him completely. "Some of those viral sequences appear to regulate our immune systems. Others might influence brain development, neurological connections, maybe even consciousness itself. We are still mapping it all out, but here's the fun part." She turned back to Vexilor, and her smile had taken on a distinctly predatory edge. "Every time we look deeper, we find out that what you called junk is actually running critical systems." Blixer pulsed with confusion. "But if viral DNA is so important to human biology, why did Professor Vexilor call it debris? Garbage?" Kira shrugged. "Because that is what everyone assumed for years. When you do not understand something, it is easier to label it as useless than to admit you have no idea what it does. Right, Professor?" Vexilor felt his thermal regulators working overtime. "Miss Wells, you are oversimplifying extremely complex, am I though?" Kira leaned against the lecture podium, casual as anything. "Because here is what I think is really bothering you, Professor. It is not that humans have viral DNA. Lots of species probably do. It is that we survived so many extinction-level viral pandemics that 8% of our genome is a trophy case of things that tried to kill us and failed. And every single one of those failures made us stronger, stranger, harder to predict." She looked around at the other students. "How many of your species have endogenous retroviral content? Anyone?" Silence. Uncomfortable, squirming silence. The arachnoid student finally spoke up, voice barely above a whisper. "My species has approximately 0.3%. 0.7, added Blixer quietly. 0.4, came another voice. Kira nodded. "Right. So humans have, what, 10 to 20 times more viral DNA than most of you, which means we survived 10 to 20 times more apocalyptic plagues. And we did not just survive them. We weaponized them. We turned our enemies into tools. We made death itself into part of our instruction manual." She turned back to the projection, staring at the glowing red sections of the human genome. "You know what my favorite part is, Professor? Every time a virus tries to extinct us, it leaves a signature. A genetic tag that says I was here, I tried, and I lost. Our DNA is not a museum of evolutionary failure. It is a memorial to our victories. We are not a patchwork species, Professor Vexilor. We are a species that patches ourselves with the corpses of our enemies. The auditorium had gone beyond silent into something approaching reverence, or possibly terror. With multiple species present, it was hard to tell the difference. Vexilor stared at his human student, and for the first time in 200 cycles, he understood why the Galactic Council had been so hesitant to approve Earth for full membership. Not because humans were primitive, not because they were aggressive or unpredictable, though they were certainly both, but because they were survivors on a level most species could not comprehend. They had been forged in a crucible of biological warfare that would have rendered most worlds completely sterile. And instead of being destroyed, they had thrived. They had adapted. They had taken their attackers and made them into building blocks. Class dismissed. Vexilor said weakly as the students filed out. Chattering excitedly in 17 different languages, Kira gathered her things. She paused at the door and looked back at the professor. Same time next week, Professor? Yes, Vexilor managed. Next week we cover human persistence, hunting, and thermoregulation. Kira grinned. Oh, you're going to hate that one too. She left, and Vexilor stood alone with the rotating projection of human DNA. All those glowing red sections like warning lights he had somehow missed for his entire career. 8%, he thought. 8% of humanity is proof that they do not just survive extinction, they remember it, and they make sure it never happens again. So what did you think? Did this story surprise you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this sci-fi story, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe for more mind-blowing science fiction stories every week. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.